And so it begins. Benjamin Brahmer, the top tight end in the transfer portal, is going to commit to Penn State from Iowa State, the first of an expected good amount of players. And also Matt Campbell and Terry Smith just continue to reload with what already is currently in Happy Valley.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right. You are locked on to Penn State football, and welcome into a live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily source, and I do mean daily source for all things Penn State sports. My name is Seyko, and I'm your host of the show, credentialed media member for both Penn State football and Penn State wrestling. Let me know your thoughts in the live chat. Thank you so much for joining me here, and we'll talk in the live chat, of course. But Penn State continues to just continue to reload with what they already have. There's still some players out there that I would like to see a decision made, but we'll go through all the latest player movement, especially starting with the Iowa State entourage that is now joining Penn State, and it kicks off with Benjamin Brahmer. So what other players should be expected to follow sooner rather than later? But let's start with just what the addition of Benjamin Brahmer means to Penn State for next season. So Brahmer was the consensus top tight end in the transfer portal, and then Luke Reynolds actually shook that up. I disagree, to each their own, but he is either the number one tight end according to On3 or the number two tight end according to 24/7. So the losses of Luke Reynolds and, Andrew Olish, not ideal, but when you're able to replace them with a veteran like Ben Brahmer, who, coupled with Marsh-Rappleyea, find me a better tight end dynamic duo than those two in the Big Ten, maybe even in the entire country. I am willing to go on the record with that I don't think there is a better dynamic duo than those guys between Rappleyea and Brahmer. And what Brahmer is going to be able to do, it's the similar skill set to Rappleyea. And this is what they want in Taylor Mauser's offense. He's the offensive coordinator now for Penn State. They're going to run a ton of 12 personnel, 13 personnel, and they need tight ends that are the complete package. They can do everything. They're physical. They can block. So these are guys that need to be able to play all three downs. You're not just a receiver. You're not just a blocker. You have to be able to do everything that they demand of a tight end. And Brahmer does that, and Rappleyea does that. Andrew Olish and Luke Reynolds, the jury's out there. Those guys are really talented receivers. They are great in the passing attack, but with what Penn State now wants to do with Matt Campbell and Taylor Mauser's offense, their identity is going to be predicated on superstar tight ends that completely do everything. So Brahmer does all of that. He checks every single box, and he's done it well. If you say, well, his stats don't really back it up, well, he was a true freshman, then he missed most of his sophomore campaign, and then he was an all-conference player this past season, and you bring him over with Rappleyea. Good luck trying to stop them in the red zone. These guys set the tone on the edge. They basically act as secondary offensive linemen. So you're going to be able to run the football at will because you have talented blockers on the boundary to chip defensive ends and climb to the second level. Guys who can catch the football, who are also excellent. They just don't catch in traffic. They create separation. We saw that with Rappleyea this season. We saw that with Brahmer. And Penn State has two of those guys. You cloned Rappleyea, or you could say you cloned Brahmer. One way or another, you have two of them to stop on a given play. What about other Iowa State players to watch for? Because they are currently en masse visiting Penn State. Well, the first group was Brahmer, Rocco Becht, and Carson Hansen. It is safe to say anybody that is visiting Penn State this early with the transfer portal being open is almost all but a guarantee. Penn State would need to severely fumble this opportunity, which is, if they're at Penn State on the first days of the portal opening, why would they not go to Penn State, right? Why would they not go to Happy Valley? Okay, it seems like their mind is made up. If you see other players that are reported that, and that's another thing, most of these guys don't have other official visits set up, or you will see other players that have 3 or 4 or 5 different dates set up for visits. Not over here. So Benjamin Brahmer had Penn State, and the deal's done. Rocco Becht, Carson Hansen, similar case. And then some of the other immediate players to watch for. So these, I can list them all off for you, but the ones that intrigue me the most, okay, particularly at quarterback there with Rocco Becht, but also Alex Mansky. We've talked about that ad nauseum. How important it is if you're going to let Ethan Grunkemeyer walk away, that's your QB of the present and the future. Well, Rocco Becht is your quarterback, presumably in the present. So who's your QB of the future? That's where Alex Mansky comes in. Takes an early visit to Penn State. And then at wide receiver. Okay, so wide receiver has just been a position group that's just been highly contentious. Nobody likes talking about it. It was the joke of college football. What, a year ago at this point? We're almost to the year anniversary of Penn State and Notre Dame, where no Penn State wide receivers had a catch in that semifinal. So Chase Sowell, who I think has a ton of upside, Zay Robinson, who comes over from Iowa State, Brett Eskelson. You start to fill out your depth chart here, and I've been thinking about this quite a bit. I imagine that Koby Howard's going to be the number 1 guy at wide receiver next season, unless they bring in an absolute bona fide star. Koby Howard's either going to be the first or second option overall. He will be a part of the starters. But as of right now, I would say Koby Howard's your best receiver of this group. And that's not to criticize who is coming in. It's that Koby Howard is that talented, and I think will take an extra step with Noah Pauley now as the wide receivers coach. But this group of Eskelson, Zay Robinson, Chase Sowell, they are all complementary receivers. They are not truly guys that take over games. They have their select moments, but it's having that supporting cast that, okay, you can interchange these guys, and you're not going to see much of a drop-off here. Eskelson was the leading receiver. Chase Sowell is really effective in the red zone. So that's where I like Penn State to be. I talk about red zone a lot here, but those guys are Penn State inside the red zone with what they're going to have on the offensive line, and then weapons at tight end and wide receiver that can just go up and get a football. It'll make Rocco Becht's job a lot easier. Speaking of tight end, because Penn State's not finished filling out the tight end room, you wouldn't see this much turnover, okay? Because it's not ideal to lose Luke Reynolds. It's not ideal to lose Andrew Olish, but okay, you're going to get Ben Brahmer. You're also going to potentially get Gabe Burkle. Gabe Burkle was that tight end too at Iowa State. So it was Benjamin Brahmer, but then it was also Gabe Burkle. Rappleyea, Brahmer, and Burkle. They're going to run 13 personnel. I'd say, oh, well, he's just going to be a backup. He'll be a bench guy, a rotational guy. He won't be the first tight end that steps onto the football field, but your depth chart continues to extend, and Burkle could be tight end number 1 in a lot of other college offenses. So this is offense is pretty secure for Iowa from the Iowa State players that are going to come over. Between the skilled guys, some of the additional offensive linemen, it's the front 7 that Penn State really needs to focus on between defensive line and linebacker. But as we continue the conversation, it continues to impress. Matt Campbell and Terry Smith continue to impress me with how they have been able to just reload the current roster, that they don't have to go and copy and paste Iowa State's roster. The idea, the blueprint was to get the best of Penn State to stay and have the best of Iowa State join, and that's coming to fruition right in front of us here. So we're going to talk about some of the other players that are staying with respect to the players that are going here, that are leaving Penn State. That is coming up next here on this live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. So Fridays on FanDuel have become a lot more exciting. They are launching a new feature called NBA Happy Hour. It gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend. So what is NBA Happy Hour? It is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. So every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, that has become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. You open up the FanDuel app during Happy Hour, and it's always going to bring something new. You have boosts, bonuses, Surprises? It's easy to check the weekly special before tip-off and make a move before the window closes. The timing is perfect. Right before the games, right before the weekend starts. It adds a little extra energy to your Friday night basketball without overthinking it. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. And again, thank you for joining me on this live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Really appreciate it. We'll jump into the comments section briefly here and then get to the players that Penn State just, I mean, it's been phenomenal. These are not Matt Campbell's players, and yet he's been able to retain a core, a foundation. And these aren't guys that, oh, well, they'll contribute a little bit. No, these are starters. These are starting caliber players. These are 2 deep players. Yes, you have your pieces on the depth chart. Don't get me wrong. But it's the combination of all of them when this roster could have easily gone anywhere else. It's not even just, oh, it's a one-way ticket to follow James Franklin of Virginia Tech. They could have gone anywhere. They could have played at a ton of other places. They're staying at Penn State. So, Evan, I like that. Maybe you're kidding, but it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek moment because Penn State just continues to add secondary players. How many more secondary players could they add? Marcus Neal, keep an eye on that name from Iowa State. He is expected to visit. That's an instant plug-and-play starter. He emerged more so down the stretch when Jontez Williams and Jeremiah Cooper ended up getting hurt in the middle of the season. So Marcus Neal is extremely talented and would go right along with Daryus Dixon and Jameer Joseph and Zion Tracy. But why cornerback has been such, I guess, an easy task for Penn State to reload is because Terry Smith, the cornerbacks guy, is still on staff. So notice how the cornerback room stays at a premium. And it's because of Terry Smith. Any update on, I see you corrected yourself. Any update on Bo Pribula? I imagine he's going to go to, I saw Georgia Tech and Virginia Tech. Definitely not linked to Penn State. Those rumors were interesting about him having an NIL offer on the table from Penn State, supposedly. And that didn't come from anybody up here. That came from Missouri insiders that were saying it was Missouri's 24/7 that reported that Bo Pribula had an offer waiting from Penn State. How that information would get back to them, I don't know. You're not going to say top tight end room in the country after last year's disappointment, are you? Do we not like Andrew Rappleyea and Ben Brahmer? Because the tight end room looks different. So my expectations for 2026 have nothing to do with what happened in 2025. So Khalil Dinkins goes to the NFL. Luke Reynolds probably going to end up at Virginia Tech. And then you have Andrew Olish going into the transfer portal. So the depth chart gets a shakeup, but I mean, that dynamic duo, go ahead and find me another player. Go ahead and find me a two better tight end duo in the Big Ten or in the country. At the moment, you can't, because part of it has to do with all the roster turnover at a bunch of other places. But right now, as we sit here in the Penn State bubble, there are going to be some good players. There are going to be some good players other places, but trying to stop Andrew Rappleyea and Ben Brahmer going to be very difficult. All right, so Penn State, and that's just what they've been able to do to this point that we've focused on here. Let's talk about the player retention that they've had, particularly in the cornerback room, because the secondary is stacked right now with Daryus Dixon, Adavian Collins, Jameer Joseph, and Zion Tracy all returning. Then at safety, you have Vavu Torre and Dejon Lane. And then you are expected to potentially land. There's a player from Colorado State that has been linked to Penn State, Noah King. Marcus Neal is an instant plug and play caliber player. And it's because there's going to be a massive need for Penn State at defensive back. So one of the initial comments there, how many more defensive backs can they get? I would like to think a lot more, or I say that over exaggerate a little bit, but I would think that they still need some other key pieces to the secondary because they're going to run a lot of 4-2-5. They're going to run a lot of 3-3-5. They are going to use the best players that they have at maximum capacity. So if this secondary is going to be as strong as it is, they are going to utilize and play towards their strengths. So Penn State has a strength at tight end. Well, you're going to run 12 and 13 personnel. Penn State is going to have a strength in the secondary. You're going to run more defensive back looks. So Iowa State ran a 3-3-5 this past season. D'Anton Lynn ran a bunch of hybrid defenses. He would run a 3-4. He would run a 2-4-5. He would basically cycle between odd and even fronts. So Penn State will run different variations of a 4-2-5, a 4-3, and that's going to be the benefit of Penn State's defense, is having that hybrid factor, and D'Anton Lynn being the guy who's capable of calling that defense and scheming it up. But I've been very impressed with the fact of who Penn State has been able to retain to this point, because there could have and should have been probably some more turnover here. There were a lot of 50-50 players out there. There were rumors that Ivan Kamaju was going to go into the portal, defensive end. That's a starting caliber player, or at a minimum 2 deep. He's either going to be a starter or a co-starter. Max Granville, that is a clear-cut starter at defensive end. Tony Rojas, clear-cut starter at linebacker when he's fully healthy. Alex Tatch, 2 deep guy, who eventually could elevate into a starting role. So some of the recent retention here between Quentin Martin and Koby Howard and some of those other players I just named, especially in the secondary, Davian Collins started for Penn State this past season. Daryus Dixon down the stretch started as a true freshman. Same thing with Jameer Joseph, got a lot of playing time as a true freshman. Zion Tracy was in and out of the lineup due to bumps and bruises. He wasn't the healthiest this season, but he would have been the starting slot cornerback if he was fully healthy for a majority of the season. So starter, co-starter, right? That's what Penn State's been able to do to this point. And being able to add some of the best players from Iowa State from a season ago that are going to be plug and play guys. Whether that's Brahmer or Rocco Becht, for example, Chase Sowell. Where Penn State needs to really try to close the gap is still in that front 7. Amari Campbell hasn't announced yet. I mean, I can check social media, and honestly, I should. But, oh, would you look at that? Penn State got a commitment from a prospect. Amarian Jackson has committed. So we have that in real time here, breaking. As he flips, he was an athlete that was committed. He was listed as an athlete committed to Iowa State. He's going to flip to Penn State. So we have that in real time there to check in on social media. That's why we have to do this, because missed some other player commitments in a previous live, ironically enough. Get Amari Campbell to announce, get a few more players along the defensive line to come back and to potentially and try to get those to fill out the roster, to fill out the depth chart. But my main concern is the defensive line, because while they've done an excellent job keeping the foundation together with guys like Granville and Kamaju, you still need depth. You still need other defensive tackles, especially if you're going to run an odd man front. If you're going to run more 3 defensive lineman sets, you need bigger, stronger defensive tackles. You essentially need more nose tackles, guys that are 2-down guys. And then what they're going to do is D'Anton Lynn's defense is based on allowing your best players to roam. So you have guys that stuff the gaps, your nose tackles, your defensive tackles. They are basically blockers for the defense. It is supposed to free up Amari Campbell in theory, right? We want him to recommit to Penn State. Tony Rojas, and then your secondary guys. So the cornerbacks being able to play downhill and not being afraid. Have your safeties be able to attack the box. And it helps do that. And then your edge defenders, you free them up so that they are in more one-on-one situations because you have a nose tackle, you have a defensive tackle in your interior that just take on double teams. They eat up space, and it forces the ball carrier, it forces the skilled guys to roam outside. And that's where your skilled guys on defense are able to counter and attack. So that's the idea that Penn State's going for here, is they want more size in the interior of the defensive line. They want to free up their defensive guys, but you have to be able to recruit them because Penn State, not only do they not have that at Penn State currently, it's going to be a premium in the transfer portal, just so everybody's aware. But I've been utterly impressed with how Penn State's done to this point with the guys that they've been able to retain. Still, some of those losses, not exactly ideal. Okay, so some of the latest ones mentioned the tight ends, Luke Reynolds, Andrew Olish. You would like to keep them, but with what Penn State's doing, it's not in their best interest to stay. What Penn State needs those players to do specifically, they're not going to be able to do it unless they really work at it. And there's all the extra competition. I don't blame any of those guys that have departed for departing. Antoine Belgrave Shorter. Hey, that's a player that I thought had a decent amount of upside. Could have been a starting safety. I mean, he started initially early on in the season, but injuries, right? Zion Tracy, King Mack, they were cycling in and out, and then they reestablished themselves. Okay. Speaking of King Mack, that's somebody that I think could have flourished in this defense as well, but his safeties coach is gone. He's probably going to go to Tennessee. That would be my prediction. That's not inside information. That's just Anthony Poindexter's at Tennessee, and he's committed to play for him not once, but twice. And that's what I want to circle back to. Matt Campbell has been able to retain dozens of these Penn State players that have no connection to him, that have no affiliation with him previously. And the players that he's been, I also want to give a shout out to particularly the position coaches, offensive line coach. Yes, Harry Smith is still in the building, but Dion Broomfield, he's the secondary coach. New defensive line coach. I mean, Penn State didn't have a defensive line coach for a while, and Ikaika Malloy comes in, and he's able to get a recommitment from Kamaju and Granville, and now Mason Robinson and DeAndre Cook and Liam Andrews, but work is still to be done in the front seven. Just know that much. Okay, we can continue to go over the roster construction, other players that Penn State fans should be aware of when it comes to the transfer portal, and also get more of your thoughts in the live chat. That is all on the way here on this live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by Game Time. And there's nothing like college football season. The tailgates, the packed stadiums, being right in the middle of it all. The energy, the bands, the moments you remember forever. But actually getting tickets, that part used to be frustrating with long queues, logins, and prices jumping at checkout. That's why Game Time gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to unlock amazing college football tickets and experiences in just a few taps. You can open up the Game Time app and see upcoming college football games, upcoming sporting events. Choose your favorite team. You'll be surprised how fast it was to find great seats. The app is incredibly easy to use. You can go from browsing to buying tickets in just minutes. And arguably the best feature is being able to see your point of view ahead of time. So if you've never been to a stadium, you've never been to a venue, you can see the view from your seat from those selected tickets before you actually go to buy. So there's no second guessing. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that is code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. All right, one final segment here on this live show. Again, appreciate everybody joining me here on a Saturday night. Could be doing a lot of other things, but you chose to spend it with me. And allow me to reciprocate as we go back into the live chat. I'm not losing my voice here. I'm good. We're going strong, right? So we're on the same page. Penn State seriously needs to get some top defensive line talent in the portal. Do what it takes to get at least 2 top talents. Penn State does need depth. I don't know that they necessarily need a superstar, because the superstars are going to be in the back end of the defense. They're going to be in the linebacker room. They're going to be supposedly, right? This is the blueprint. This is what I see them trying to do, is they want Tony Rojas and Amari Campbell. That's going to be your anchors in the linebacker room. They are going to be your stars. They are going to go all over the place. You have Max Granville on the edge. You have Yvonne Kemaju on the edge. Alex Tatch is going to back them up. I'm glad to see, again, this is the portal attrition that Penn State's been able to offset. Okay, there is no, I don't want to say there's no reason, right? That's not fair of me to say. It was difficult maybe to justify DeAndre Cook and Liam Andrews, who struggled to find their footing for Penn State. The transfer portal is so appealing because the options are endless, right? You kind of know how your past couple of seasons, if you haven't had a good time at Penn State or it hasn't lived up to your expectations, you have a new coaching staff, especially with the position groups. Most of your position coaches have flipped over. These aren't guys that recruited you. They don't know you well. And then the transfer portal, you can go anywhere. You can go play for any school. You're going to get dozens of NIL offers, right? But is it a fit? And that's why I'm always going to default back to, in any conversation that we have, that this could have been and should have been a lot worse. James Franklin is a player's coach, okay? And him not going far away, going to Virginia Tech, he was going to get some players. But this group that Penn State's been able to retain, that is over 25 players at this point. All the seniors moving on. Now, I know this opens up opportunities for playing time, but then Matt Campbell comes in. 40-plus Iowa State players go into the transfer portal. Again, you can just copy and paste Iowa State's roster. And it didn't end that way. That was the simple, I guess, answer when you're looking at this from afar. But that's why the retention of Terry Smith was so important. Guys like, I guess we didn't even get into Dan Connor being retained, taking a demotion just to stay at Penn State. So not only is Matt Campbell able to re-recruit players, he's been able to re-recruit coaches. That Dan Connor would rather stay at Penn State, take a demotion, when he could have been the full-time linebackers coach at Virginia Tech, maybe even gets a pay raise, who knows, right? And he's going to stay at Penn State. That's a Penn State guy through and through. So on my tangent there, yes, Penn State does need defensive linemen because defensive linemen are always going to be key, especially in the Big Ten. But with more odd man fronts, it's not necessarily the end all be all. I do want to see Penn State still get defensive tackles because they are at a premium. You've retained some of your key edge defenders, and it is what it is at this point with defensive line, and everybody is going to be targeting those players. So I will stand by the fact that I've said the defensive line still is the top priority for Penn State. I don't think they necessarily need a superstar because that's not where this defense is based around. You need depth above all else. Any thoughts on potential running back coach candidates? Would be nice to get someone who is a decent recruiter. Yes, that one is strange to me. Probably should have been more prepared for that because I imagine it's going to be brought up. Tony Alford, Michigan running backs coach, was rumored. I like Charles Walker a ton as somebody that's been in Penn State's room. And I haven't seen any reports of him leaving. Or if you can keep him, I say you have to keep Charles Walker at a minimum as the assistant running backs coach. I have no qualms with Matt Campbell trying to go outside and find a different running backs coach. That's completely, I don't have a long list of names. That one's kind of been a head scratcher to this point. Ikaika Malloy at defensive line, just another defensive mind. That's phenomenal in the room. So you have Danton Lim, you have Ikaika Malloy. Penn State goes out and gets another linebackers coach, right? For the defensive coordinator over from Cincinnati. And it's the group, it's the collective group of minds. Then you keep Dan Connor. You have Terry Smith. You have Deion Broomfield. It's not just, yes, the defensive coordinator is going to call plays, Danton Lim, but it's that collection of people that are going to be game planning week to week, day to day to put together that comprehensive game plan. So Akaika Malloy being a former defensive coordinator, massive plus. And I'm blanking on the name of the guy they just hired at the linebacker coach spot. I will get that in just a second. I'm sure the comment section will help me out, but I want to find it right here. Oh, I don't even know how to pronounce that. That's Tyson Veet. I hope that's right. I'll get the pronunciation later. We'll say former Cincinnati defensive coordinator for right now. I got to make sure I get that pronunciation right for a later time. But he's a former defensive coordinator. So think about that for a moment. Danton Lynn, defensive coordinator. Cincinnati's former defensive coordinator, now the linebackers coach, has called plays before, understands how to scheme. Akaika Malloy, defensive line coach, former defensive coordinator. Terry Smith, former head coach. Okay, to go alongside what Matt Campbell's doing, right? So this is, the defense got has just a ton of top minds in college football that have been at that defensive peak. No, they haven't all been head coaches, but 3 guys have been play callers at some point in time at the Power 4 level. That's what you're trying to go for if you're Penn State. So on that tangent, I only have 2 names for running backs coach. It will probably be a surprise, but I've been impressed because Matt Campbell's had to do the heavy lifting unless something else is going on behind the scenes, which probably it could be. But to retain Quentin Martin, you have running backs that are looking to transfer in Mekhi Frazier, who was the lead rusher for Michigan State, LJ Phillips, who was an absolute superstar at the FCS level. He had, 2,000 yards, a little over or close to it. And you're going to bring him in for a visit. So your running back room gets 2 high-quality players if you get them to commit, but they're setting up visits early, which leads me to believe, okay, hey, Penn State's in a really good spot with no running backs coach currently designated. I mean, Matt Campbell, Taylor Mauser are doing all the heavy lifting until they get that settled. How about Nick Marsh from Michigan State? As much as I would love it, not realistic. I saw he was linked to Notre Dame and Indiana. Nick Marsh, his connection was to James Franklin. He's not going to go to Virginia Tech. That's one of, I would say when Nick Marsh is healthy, he was a top 3 receiver in the Big Ten behind Jeremiah Smith. And I mean, you could even say Carnell Tate. Ironically, because and Ohio State didn't even make the semifinal this year, right? But yes, Nick Marsh would be ideal. You have Marsh, Koby Howard, combined Eskelson, Sowell from Iowa State. That is a good wide receiver quad, but not going to get Nick Marsh. So I won't get anybody's hopes up. If something radically changes, I will go live instantly because that would be a massive addition for Penn State. So I see, let's see, Jontez Williams. Yes, I found that kind of interesting. I said Penn State one way or another was going to be in a win-win type of setup at secondary because Daryus Dixon, Jameer Joseph, Zion Tracy, Davian Collins, right? Those are 4 starting caliber cornerbacks. Jontez Williams not visiting Penn State. It's concerning because of the player of who he is, right? Initially, he was a top 10 player overall, according to On3, and then the rankings reshuffled and everything. Jeremiah Cooper and Jontez Williams, you would have loved if you were Iowa State to get one or both, but it does not shock me that and I said that in my initial previews, right? Talked to Brian Smith. We just talked about my thoughts on the transfer portal overall. Those guys were going to command attention. They were not going to just fly under the radar and have a one-way ticket to Penn State. No. USC, guys in the SEC getting in contact with them. That's no surprise. So they want to go play there, so be it. It is concerning from the fact that you're missing out on star players. The more the merrier. It has nothing to do with, Penn State secondary is in a bad spot now because they missed out on 1 or 2 guys. You would still like to hopefully get one of them on campus for a visit, but it's just not looking good. So I'm glad that people brought that up because it's not ideal. But it's not going to hurt Penn State in the end. Perich. I'm glad we brought him up because the Minnesota circles are not happy about that. Perich, yeah. I think he's going to end up at Oregon. And I'll tell you why. It's strictly a hunch. I talked to one of my mutuals, Dylan Callahan Crowley. You've seen him on the show, but he actually covers Minnesota a ton for On3. The everydayers might know him when he was covering Penn State for the Rivals site. He does coverage for Minnesota for On3. And I was messaging back and forth with him, and he told me the initial lean was Ohio State. And I said, you should probably watch out for Oregon. And why I say that is because Dylan Thieneman, who was at Purdue, made the game-winning interception and basically tanked Penn State, right? He was the reason, Dylan Thieneman was the reason that Penn State's even at this point, because he went to Oregon. He picked off Drew Aller in that game. Koby Perich has a very similar timeline, if you will. A middling Big Ten team. Well, I guess Purdue's at the bottom. Okay. Let's describe it this way. Teams in the Big Ten that have no aspirations of winning the conference anytime soon. It'll be once in 2 decades that you're able to compete at the top in this modern day and age of college football. Thieneman was that at Purdue. He went to Oregon. Koby Perich, same thing with Minnesota. You're a superstar safety. You don't have the supporting cast. You go into the portal because A, you're going to get a raise, and B, you're going to be around better talent. He's going to end up at Oregon. Dan Lanning enters the chat anytime he sees one of those middling Big Ten school superstar safeties enter the portal. Yes, Caleb Bacon and Will Hawthorne, old school PSU linebackers. They are must-have from a depth standpoint. Tony Rojas and Amari Campbell are still your dynamic duo at linebacker. You want those guys to fill out your depth chart. They are tall, right? I'm kind of used to Penn State getting these super athletic, sometimes a thumper kind of linebacker, but they stand at 6 foot, 6'1". And some of these guys are 6'4", 6'5", coming over from Iowa State. They're definitely visiting. So let me check their profiles real quick. So Caleb Bacon is 6'3". That's a tall linebacker. You're almost a defensive end at that point. Cale Brazina, 6'3", 210 pounds. That's his list. I have a hard time believing that he is 210 pounds. No linebacker is going to work out in college football at that. With same thing, Cooper Ebel, he's 6'3", 200. I don't buy that because you can't be that weight as a linebacker. You have to be at least 230. So either they don't have a great nutrition program at Iowa State, or On3 has their player profiles incorrect. But those guys are visiting. Those guys are visiting from Iowa State. So I'm glad that people brought them up. Really talented players. And I think those metrics are incorrect. Sum up Amari and Jackson. I'm not familiar with him. It's great to see that Penn State builds out the class of 2026. I would need to do some more due diligence because I wasn't expecting Penn State to get a commitment there. I was not expecting Penn State to get a late night commitment on Saturday. Did Tyser Denmark enter the portal yet? That's an interesting one because he was actually one of the first players to walk off the field at the Pinstripe Bowl. And basically that made me say, okay, he's probably going to enter the portal. But Penn State wants and needs wide receivers. I think for Denmark's sake, he's local. He's a Pennsylvania native. He gets a restart at Penn State with a new wide receivers coach. Why not take that opportunity? Why not try to start over? Because I still think Denmark is a really good wide receiver. He's a great route runner. Give it Noah Polley puts people in the NFL. New wide receivers coach for Penn State. That's somebody that I think can take Denmark and start to unlock some of his potential. At least, I mean, that's why Koby Howard stuck around. Koby Howard's from the state of Florida. His wide receivers coach, who he absolutely loves, and Marcus Hagans, is over at Michigan, and he's staying at Penn State. That's intentional. It's because Noah Polley, he knows that Noah Polley is going to take him to a new level, but also I think he realizes he's going to be a focal point in Penn State's offense one way or another for the next 2 seasons. So that's not by accident. He's not just taking a chance. He has certainties. He has guarantees that he knows that he's getting from Penn State. Grunk is going to Virginia Tech. Is that confirmed? Is that official? Or is that just a rumor? That means Bo Prabula is going to Georgia Tech, which is fine. Virginia Tech is set to host transfer quarterback. There it is. Ethan Grunkemeyer. So he's visiting. It's not official, but he's visiting. I also see that Auburn is in the mix for Mekhi Frazier. If you're Penn State, so that's that Michigan State running back. If you're Mekhi Frazier, or if you're Penn State, you would like to get Mekhi Frazier. So that's where I got to wrap things up here. We're a little bit over our time limit, but I'm always happy to do that, to talk to all of you in the live chat. So I want to thank you all again for joining me here on a Saturday night. Really appreciate it as always. We're going to be doing plenty more live shows. So don't you worry. We'll have plenty more live reactions. There's going to be much more portal movement, and the subtractions have gotten out of the way. We're going to see more additions. So the retention's been great, but now we're going to actually start seeing additions from Iowa State, from other schools, and that's going to be a ton of fun to talk about. So if you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. We're also going to have more Penn State wrestling coverage coming up on the way, but definitely this will be your prime spot for all things transfer portal when it comes to Penn State. My name is Zach Seyko. I'm your host of Locked On Nittany Lions. As always, thank you for joining me here on a live show. I'll be talking to you again very soon. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network out there.